Hey
Hello.
there! Finally. So good to see
Sorry.
you. I
Yes,
mean,
you too. Lovely to see you.
yes, and I think these we are quite used to it by now after a year of connecting digitally with so many people, right?
I know, and
So a
sometimes it's
very
totally smooth and sometimes not.
absolutely, absolutely. So a very warm welcome to Soul Speak Studio. This is a space where I host interviews with a whole lot of people, with authors, with experts in different fields. And I'm so glad to have you here today. Let me first, thank you. Let me first introduce Mimi Nicklin to the ones who joined in. So she's an author, she's a keynote speaker. She has over 15 years of experience in the marketing communication industry. She has lived and worked in London, Hong Kong, Singapore, Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Dubai. And her uniquely global perspective changes organizations from the inside out. She hosts a show called Empathy for Breakfast and has a podcast called Secret of the Gap. And her book, Softening the Edge, was launched in September last year and it became a bestseller. Mimi's passion is for balancing humanism and capitalism. Mimi is a passionate opinion leader who's bravely breaking open the conversation surrounding the global empathy deficit impacting our world. And I am so honored to have you here. And I'm so glad that I could connect with you. I'm equally passionate about empathy. And in my work with children and the other work that I do, I always try to build in empathy in whatever I'm doing. And here you go. I found you, somebody who is so passionate about the same subject. Okay, so before we go and talk about your book and the subject you've written about, I want to start with a word which I think the pandemic has made us value much more, and that is gratitude. Uh, the year was turbulent. It had terrible lows for all of us, I'm sure. But I personally felt that the world became gentler. And I think we became a little more mindful in our thoughts and in our actions. So my question to you is, what lessons did 2020 leave behind for you as a parent, as a leader, a business leader, and as a community member?
Oh, it's such a great question. I think you're right. The world has become a little bit softer in some ways. There's certainly an increased awareness of our shared humanity now, which is definitely a good thing. And let's be honest, out of the pandemic, there's many, many terrible things. But when I started this empathy journey, very few people were talking about it, certainly not in media, certainly not in the business world, and that has changed. There is definitely, I think you used the word gratitude, more gratitude for the things that we have, for the homes that we live in, for the connections that we used to have so seamlessly and now, often can't have at all. So I do think that there's a raised awareness of these things and that people have become more aware of their own humanity and the sort of culture that they share with others. So let's just hope that hangs around.
And personally, what lessons do you think the year has left behind for you?
Yeah, I think all of those things, the need to be with my family, the importance of being able to travel whenever you want. And I don't mean for a beach vacation. I mean the really important life events and even death events, right? People are missing funerals. There's all kinds of things. So yes, I think I definitely learned, as you said, the sort of gratitude and the awareness of being able to travel whenever you want and how important your family and those that you love really are.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Mimi, I'm very curious to know this first, that you've lived across continents, you've lived in so many countries. So, and you've been exposed to various cultures, different kinds of people. So, what is the level of empathy that you've seen? And I mean, I'm sure there are gradations in the countries that you've lived in, both personally and professionally. Are there differences in the places that you've lived in on the levels?
For sure. There isn't a global audit per se, something maybe one day I'll get around to doing. But definitely I've seen varying levels of empathy, and it tends to be based on the type of societies that you're based in. So in the more collectivist societies, which tend to be in the East, so India, China, Southeast Asia, parts of the Middle East, definitely parts of Africa, where we see these very much more collectivist societies, we do see higher levels of natural empathy. People are used to thinking about those around them and connecting with those in their communities. They live more close-knit lives. They are just generally more connected to each other and to their society. In the more individualistic societies, UK, Europe, USA, Canada, Australia, those countries who are living these far more reserved, segregated, isolated, individualistic lives, they're the ones that need a little bit more help with reconnecting with each other. And as I said, with reconnecting with that shared humanity that we will have. So as I said, there's not a global audit, but definitely when I've been living in the more collectivist societies, you do see a far more natural ability to connect and understand those around you.
Okay, that makes sense. When in our daily lives we are managing, we are mediating between so many things. We are juggling multiple priorities. Very honestly, before we go on to proper empathy as a topic, what I felt is before one empathizes with somebody else, the first step is self-empathy. Our own well-being, is also critical before we sort of come out in the world as an engaged leader, a thoughtful leader, or a family member, wherever we are. So, and I'm curious to know that is self-empathy being more mindful in what you say or do, or there's more to that?
You're right, absolutely, that self-empathy is at the core of all empathy. So in order to be able to empathize with others, we first have to empathize with ourselves. What self-empathy actually is about an awareness of self. So it's about understanding what's going on inside you, what you need to thrive, what you need to do well and be happy, but also how you can connect with others. If you're not aware of your own emotions, feelings, soul, it's very difficult to empathize with others because you'll never be able to know if you're truly understanding them or your reflection or perception of what they're saying. So it's about looking inward in order to be able to empathize with others.
Right, and definitely all of us need to do that first before we go ahead and try to be empathetic with others, right?
Absolutely.
True. And also, when we come to workplaces now, there is a general misconception that if being empathetic is showing your weaker side, and I'll be losing the upper hand. Typically in hierarchical setups, do you think as a leader or a team player, silencing your ego is a prerequisite for being empathetic?
Absolutely not. Empathy doesn't have anything to do with ego or opinion. Of course, if you can manage your ego, you're probably better at empathizing. But the reality is that empathy is about understanding. So even the most ego-driven leader can be a brilliant empathy specialist or empathy advocate. Empathy is about the ability to see the world from someone else's eyes. And even if you are driven by self-success, egotistic decision-making, that doesn't mean that you can't also be empathetic when you're sitting in meetings, hear other people's opinions, and value them. So, really what I always say is empathy is a choice. It's a data set and it's a skill set. And whilst, as I said, there are personality traits that may make you a better or more natural empathizer, perhaps, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. Personality trait doesn't sort of change your ability to empathize.
Absolutely. I guess we're all born with it. It's just that as we grow older, we don't have the courage to show it.
Absolutely. We're all born with equal amounts of empathy. That's one of the questions I get asked the most. And the answer is it sits in our prefrontal cortex. It's built into our brain at birth. And we all have exactly the same amount. Men, women, brothers, sisters, young, old. How you choose to use it is what changes. But the actual skill set, we all have.
Absolutely. Now, in your prologue to the book, you mention your father. And you also say that he understood people's lives and the realities deeply. So empathy is almost like a part of your DNA. So if you could tell us a little bit about him and how that has made you what you are today, an empathy advocate with a best-selling book. I mean, what was your childhood or what was your growing up years like with an empathetic parent?
Mm. Okay, someone asked me that last week, and it's really interesting because both of you, both women, have asked me that in the last week, and yet nobody has ever asked it before the last week. So there's obviously something in the energy out there. But I don't think my family sort of made me empathetic, or that my childhood created me to be more empathetic or interested in this field. I really, truly think that we are born that way, and that for me, I was born sort of built to be like this. But certainly, having a family unit that was very respectful of our own characters. I had a sister, so it was two girls. You know, incredibly supportive. We were allowed to be very independent, find our own path. They believe in us, you know. So we have a huge amount of support from our parents to be able to be what we want to be. And of course, I value that absolutely, you know, hugely. So I don't think my dad made me more empathetic. What I do think my dad did was inspire me to this day, and he's now in his 80s, to be a creative leader, which is what he was. So he was always in the advertising industry, as had I been. He was a writer that was very able to take on the world of others, to write their stories, to tell their stories. And absolutely, as a craft, a creative craft or creative craftsmanship from his point of view, that, without a doubt, I follow every day. And he definitely made me into the passionate writer and storyteller that I am. So again, I think it's more about nature and nurture, right? So the nature piece, I think I was probably born this way. But the nurture side of that, in terms of being able to write about it and speak about it with confidence and, I hope, poise and grace and all of those things, that definitely came from my mum and dad.
Okay. So now I would like to come to my favorite part, which is children. So when we look around children all around us, whether it's a 4-year-old who has a phone in her hand or a 17-year-old who has more digital friends than real friends and in their own kind of solo bubbles, do you think as a parent, I mean, you and me both are parents, I mean, as parents, simply modeling empathy is enough to raise empathetic kids, or we need to engage with this generation at different levels to sort of raise their awareness, and maybe to start with include empathy awareness or classes in their school and undergrad curriculums, because just being a role model I don't think is going to help with this generation, the Gen Z particularly.
I think it will help on a one-on-one level. So when it comes to your relationship with your child or children, role modeling is a huge part of how we teach empathy, right? So particularly between the ages of 3 and 6, which are the sort of personality forming years, if they see you modeling and role modeling that, you are part of the change, right? You're part of bringing up a more empathetic culture, future, society. Now, what we know is we have 3 decades of declining empathy levels. So to your point, is that enough? No, probably not. And we should be teaching this. In fact, in Denmark, they have empathy classes on their curriculum and have had for a very long time.
They call it step by step, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, exactly. So I do think that there should be a conscious shift in what we teach our children in schools. I don't think it's only empathy, though. I think teamwork, communication, innovation, creativity. For me, these are the skills of the future. Do they need to have an academic basis? Yes, I'm sure they do. You know, that's good for us as human beings to be educated and to have an acceptance of all the things in the world. But for me, those that are going to change the world, those that are going to cultivate really positive shifts for our future, are those that can talk to each other, understand each other, communicate, and then creatively problem solve. I think empathy is one part of that, and it's the root to many of those things. How do you create the people if you don't understand them? How do you motivate people if you don't understand them? How do we create diverse and inclusive environments if we don't first understand each other? So I do think it should be an active change in our society, in schools and universities, and certainly in corporations. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be teaching this within our teams as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the more awareness, the more we talk about it, I guess, as you said, the more we talk about it, the more empathy there will be, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, my favorite sentence.
Now, very honestly, this is though I know it's a misconception, but people do say that women seem to be more empathetic than women. I mean, than men. And
Mm.
yes, there are globally. We've seen leaders like Angela Merkel and Norway's Erna Solberg. We've seen Jacinda Ardern, who are known for their very distinctive style of leadership. And in fact, they've handled the COVID situation so much better. But do you think empathy has a gender gap, or it can be seen equally in both men and women?
I think it's definitely in both men and women. As I said earlier, this is something we're born with. I spent quite a lot of time looking at the data. What we do know is that there are some measures where women respond with more speed than men, basically, in empathizing and connecting with others. And I believe that is due to social context rather than any specific data. So that is to
Your
do with
voice
the
is
fact
cracking
that
a bit, Mimi. I don't know why. Yeah, your screen is also.
is that better?
Yeah, this is better. Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I was saying it's to do with social context. So generations and generations of women who have grown up in environments where they're homemakers, they're family creators, they're responsible for the understanding of the unit. And over generations, there is a sense of shared learning. But is there actually a difference between men and women? No. And some of the most empathetic leaders in the world are men. So Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, for example. So this is not being led by women. I'm a woman, but that's, by the by. There's many men leading this discussion and leading this from a
absolutely.
leadership style point of view.
But somehow I think the general feeling is, oh, I mean, this is a skill women have much more of than men, and they can handle these situations maybe in a better way. Um, so how can we? This is something I think so many of us face. How can we be more empathetic with people who we don't agree with? Because there are people who are not on the same plane as us, who we don't feel connected to, but yet we have to engage with them, right? So how do you think we can be empathetic with such people?
The key to empathy is that it needs to be judgmentless and opinionless. So empathy is not about agreeing with people. It's not about liking people. I mean, you can hate someone and still empathize with them. Part of that is just awareness. Part of it's commitment to being able to do that. For sure, I'm in conversations in my business life where I have to sit and empathize. I connect. I understand what this person in front of me is talking to. Does that mean that we're going to be friends outside of the business world? Does that mean that I agree with his or her opinions, judgments, life choices? But that doesn't matter because my role in that conversation, in that connection, is about understanding. As I said, not about agreement or judgment. So I think that's a big shift for people to get their heads around. Can you empathize with people you don't like? Yes. Can you empathize with people that have perhaps done something that you really disagree with? Perhaps a prisoner, someone who has committed a crime that you personally do not concur with, can't find peace with. That doesn't mean you can't understand them. So
Absolutely.
absolutely, I think really that's about a mindset and a commitment to being someone that empathizes with others.
So somebody here who has joined from Switzerland is saying that in Sweden and Finland, empathy is practiced. Yes, yeah, definitely. In empathy is practiced in the schools with students of all ages. And somebody says, I think we confuse conditioning of women to serve and care as empathy, which is true also.
Yes, absolutely.
Mimi, what do you think are, say, the 4 or 5 key ways in which one can be more empathetic?
Look, I think there's a few kind of key tips around empathizing more. Eye contact is massively important, whether you're in real life or on a screen. Probably more so when you're on a screen, because if I started looking all around now, you guys would know. You're like, she's not really paying attention. So eye contact is a huge part, and subconsciously, as human beings, we are tuned to respond to eye contact. So when you make better eye contact with people, you build trust, you build relationship, you build connection. Fundamentally, as human beings, at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy is a need to be seen and to be heard. So to see people is incredibly important. Smiling is another one, which is incredibly critical. Again, when we smile at each other, it activates things in our subconscious mind, and it helps connect us. So, body language, eye contact is a really, really important thing that you can do in order to be able to empathize with people better. And language is a really big part of that as well. So how you say things, how do you activate your curiosity? How do you show people that you're listening, that you're interested, that you're following? The way you use language is also really, really important. I love the question, particularly on Zoom and these platforms while we're all working remotely. I love the question to my team, tell me something that I didn't know about your day today. Immediately that person thinks, this person wants to listen to better. So yeah, there's many examples of that, but the way you use language and body language are incredibly important parts of showing and sharing empathy with others.
So non-verbal language actually is a big thing, which is part of this.
Hugely important.
Good. So what is next for Mimi as an empathy advocate? Your book is out, you have your podcast, and you have the show which you do. But what is next for you?
So I'm writing my second book
Oh,
now towards the end of the last year. Yep. So I'm writing my second book. Empathy for Breakfast, which is my podcast, is now into its third season, and it's becoming much more interactive as a show with some really amazing guests from around the world. So I'm really, really excited about that. And then setting up my own platform called Empathy Everywhere, which is the world's first empathy platform, or platform dedicated to empathy, from which I'll be doing coaching and consulting with organizations, and also quite a lot of creative solutions for brands that want to connect more empathetically with their audiences and teams. So yeah, lots going on, and I'm very excited about the next few months ahead, and just making a change, really being able to be part of that increasing of empathy in our world, which is what I get up for every day.
That sounds fabulous. We have a question here, and she says, what would you say when you're asked to not smile too much by the HR of the company you work for, or not to be too friendly with your colleagues?
Look, I think I hear questions like that all the time. I think it's very difficult. There are some incredibly dogmatic, traditional people out there in business today who really believe in a disconnected workplace. They believe that people do better at work when you keep personal or just human life out of business. I can tell you that the data proves it doesn't work. So asking people to not connect with fellow human beings, which is sort of what she's saying, don't talk, don't smile, don't engage, don't be emotionally connected. Asking people to be disconnected is part of what has fueled our loneliness endemic. So the loneliness endemic.
Also, sorry to interrupt you, just to add, I think we're also building walls and boundaries. We do build walls and boundaries, and stick to don't go there, don't mix. That's something that happens
and
so much.
That's not how human beings thrive. Human beings, we are pack animals. We're tribesmen, right? We do not thrive alone. It's in anything. So particularly in HR, it's incredibly disappointing to hear something like that. But in terms of answering the question, I would probably ask why. Be curious, be empathetic, right? Ask that HR person, could you explain to me, what you're thinking? Could you explain to me how you came to that conclusion? Could you help me understand your way of thinking? That would be my solve to that, because as someone who believes in empathy, we can empathize even when perhaps we disagree. As I said earlier with the information, try and understand what the rationale is, and perhaps you could find a middle ground or a way to explore that together, because as I said, the loneliness endemic is literally plaguing our world, and the data now shows that is more dangerous, this is a crazy statistic, than obesity and smoking. Loneliness is killing more people than smoking is. So to fuel more loneliness in the workplace is not the answer.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. So what is your next book on? Is it a nonfiction or?
It's still nonfiction. I'm going to be focusing more on curiosity So still in the realm of empathy, but specifically on curiosity and how we nurture more curiosity in the world.
Oh, very good. Fantastic. And if you could just name two books which have inspired you in the recent past, or which has moved you in some ways, or which has left you with some thoughts.
Mm. I often talk about Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg.
Sandberg.
It's an old book now, but it's a fantastic book. And as a female leader, it came out at a time that was incredibly poignant for me in my career. And I think Cheryl has many words of wisdom in there. Today, it has been pulled apart a little bit, even by her. But I think there's lots of gems of real wisdom in there. And that book has had a huge sort of part to play in my life. There is also a book called Conscious Capitalism, which is about 3 years old, and it's also a fantastic read, has really sort of solidified some of my thinking in the workplace, in the corporate world, and how we sort of really bring caring and conscientiousness into our leadership style. So also a really good book. So yeah, I mean, there's so many, but I think those two have been really poignant to me in the last couple of years.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mimi. I mean, that was such a wonderful discussion, and all the best for your new book, and all the best for your empathy, everything, right? That's your new venture?
Everywhere. Empathy everywhere.
Everywhere. Empathy everywhere. So all the best for empathy everywhere. And hopefully we'll see you in India sometime. Have you been to India before?
I'm waiting many times, and
okay.
I'm waiting to come. So absolutely, I'll be there as soon as the world opens up again.
Looking forward to that, and thank you so much, and thanks to everybody who joined in and participated. And Mimi, thank you so much for being part of this, and really a pleasure having you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Lovely to see you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. 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 Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody who joined in. I'm sorry I couldn't say hi to all of you, but yeah, it was lovely to see all of you. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Bye-bye.